The honorary degree conferment ceremony will now commence. Please rise. Please be seated. Professor Rocky Tuan, the Vice Chancellor, will now deliver an address.
Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Dr. Sonia Sachs, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. With great pleasure and honor, I invite you to join me in welcoming the world-renowned economist and a remarkable leader in sustainable development, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and his wife, Dr. Sonia Sachs, to the Chinese University of Hong Kong. We come together today to celebrate the conferment of our honorary degree upon Professor Sachs in recognition of his outstanding contributions to human civilization, in particular, the significant impact he has made in the advancement of the cause of sustainable development. We are very thankful that Professor Sachs is with us today. A very warm welcome to CUHK and to Hong Kong, actually, again. As one of the world's most influential experts on economic development, poverty alleviation, and sustainability, not only is Professor Sachs committed to nurturing students as positive change agents for the world in his capacity as a professor at Columbia University, but he also works tirelessly to support different countries and regions to develop policies that address the most pressing global challenges. The seminal work of Professor Sachs goes beyond deepening people's understanding of the grave situation the world is currently facing amidst geopolitical tensions, environmental degradation, and a worsening poverty landscape. He has been passionately offering practical solutions that can transform lives and communities. Having been a long-serving advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations and currently presiding over the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN, Professor Sachs helps to formulate strategies to advance the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, guided by the aspiration for a greener, fairer, and better world. CUHK is proud to have co-hosted the Hong Kong chapter of the SDSN with the Hong Kong Jockey Club Charities Trust since 2018. In fact, Jeff was here with us at the launch ceremony in 2018 when I was still a freshman, as a vice chancellor, that is, in CUHK. I still vividly recall he came and delivered a keynote speech and visited our Museum of Climate Change, which is the world's first and only museum dedicated to climate change. One of the things I found out from Jeff through the last many years of interactions with him, unfortunately, most of them by Zoom, so a two-dimensional Jeff, was his ability to relate. The ability to really relate at all levels, a personal level, intellectual level, a global level, and even political level. He is outspoken in many ways, but always with tremendous sincerity and very, very convincing. He's probably one of the best speakers I have ever heard from academia, but he's more than just academia, of course. So we're also proud to say that over the past years, CUHK has made significant progress in further integrating our teaching, research, and engagement into our university social responsibility and sustainable development goals, as well as extending the impact of our work to the wider community. Today, we are proud and privileged to welcome Professor Sachs to our CUHK family. Professor Sachs believes that every human being has the power to shape a better world, and that the world needs strong global partnerships, especially in times of trouble. A tenet that aligns perfectly with the core values of CUHK. In fact, just to inform Jeff that our strategic plan 2025 has a tagline of excellence with purpose and responsibility. So, Professor Sachs, please accept our heartfelt congratulations on this well-deserved accolade in celebration of your outstanding academic career and indelible impact on sustainable development. We look forward to the insights and guidance you will continue to provide as we work together to tackle the complex challenges of our time and strive towards a more sustainable and equitable future. In fact, as I often tell my students, and I think I learned it from him, from Jeff, is that always remember that we have not inherited this planet from our parents or our ancestors, but instead we have borrowed it from our children. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tuan. Please be seated. Professor Nick Rollins, the public orator, will now deliver a citation for Professor Jeffrey David Sachs.
Jeffrey David Sachs. Imagine a world whose nations live in peace within a truly multilateral accord. Poverty is eradicated, good education is available to all, global warming is brought under control, and the Earth's extraordinary biodiversity is protected. This may sound like an impossible dream, given that today there are at least 30 active conflicts and at least 100 million people forcibly displaced. Nearly 1 billion people still live in extreme poverty. Moreover, the target of limiting global warming since pre-industrial levels to 1.5 degrees centigrade is likely to be missed perhaps as early as 2027, with disastrous consequences whose outriders we're already witnessing. Yet, the dream remains those globally agreed goals. And despite many challenges, some progress is being achieved, from expansion of education in poorer countries and reduction in diseases such as malaria and AIDS, to actions to limit climate change we see in our daily lives, such as the worldwide switch to electric cars, as one example. For the sake of future generations, we must persevere and indeed intensify our global efforts. And we also have some reasons for optimism. Our technologies are advancing rapidly, giving us new solutions for renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, online education, and much more. Also, the world's nations have agreed, even if they've not yet implemented, commitments to forge peace over war, protect human rights, enforce international law, and achieve sustainable development. At the global level, those commitments have been forged in the work of the United Nations, founded in 1945 out of the ashes of World War II. Since then, the UN has brought together a great majority of the world's nations, now 193 member states in total, to agree to UN conventions, treaties, declarations, and goals, however much messy reality may get in the way. A main reason for hope is that informing the UN and its agencies are some truly talented and dedicated people who share their expertise with political leaders and its international networks. It gives me enormous pleasure to present today as an honorand one of the most significant and influential, Professor Jeffrey D. Sachs, University Professor at Columbia University and Director of its Center for Sustainable Development, one of the world's leading experts on economic development, global macroeconomics, climate change, and the fight against poverty. For the last quarter of a century, Professor Sachs has been at the heart of global leadership in the vital quest for the sustainable development of our planet. Indeed, he's been advisor to not one but three Secretary Generals of the UN, first for Kofi Annan in helping to plot strategies to achieve the UN Millennium Development Goals, then Ban Ki-moon as those goals were implemented, and now Antonio Guterres, for whom he serves as an advocate of the Sustainable Development Goals that he helped design and that were launched in 2015 to build on the Millennium Development Goals. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as they're widely known, agreed to by world leaders to build a greener, fairer, better world by 2030, can only be achieved if there is global and national cooperation on the one hand, and local understanding, commitment, and action on the other. Professor Sachs has worked tirelessly from macro to micro levels to support global leaders in policy making and mobilize expertise from academia, civil society, and the private sector for implementation. This is the remit of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network that he established as director in 2012 under the auspices of the UN Secretary General, and which he now presides over. It's grown into a formidable force for change, with more than 1,900 member institutions across all continents. I draw particular attention to this network because at CUHK, we're immensely proud to co-host its Hong Kong chapter with the Hong Kong Jockey Club Charities Trust. Since it was established in 2018 with Professor Sachs's support and attendance, our chapter has been doing its part to address the interlinked economic, social, and environmental changes that face us all, even in relatively prosperous Hong Kong. The global members frequently involve universities. Indeed, Professor Sachs has long championed the role of universities in achieving sustainable development. His pioneering leadership in establishing interdisciplinary programs complemented by research and action has been a model for others, including this university. Professor Sachs's networking reaches far and wide. He launched and sits on the board of several regional centers for the SDGs, such as the Jeffrey D. Sachs Center of Sustainable Development at Sunway University in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia for the ASEAN countries, and SDG centers for Latin America, the Arab region, and Africa. Professor Sachs has long recognized that to effect change, his voice must be heard. He's thus shared his ideas and experience in best-selling books such as The End of Poverty. He participates actively in the media and teams up with others who can hold global attention, such as his friend, the rock star Bono, Professor Sachs works with many religious leaders. Pope Francis and Greek Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew co-wrote the foreword to the recent book Ethics in Action, based on a project with the Vatican's led by Professor Sachs. Professor Sachs has often made the case that the funds required to meet the world's basic economic needs, including education and healthcare for all, are already available in the GDPs of rich countries or billionaires' bank accounts. He recently cited that before the pandemic, only 41% of children in low-income countries were completing lower secondary education, well short of the SDG goal of 100% by 2030. This, he argued, was largely due to poverty in those countries, and that funding gap could be closed with the equivalent of just 0.1% per year of the income of rich countries, or less than 1% per year of the wealth of the world's billionaires. With the widening gulf between the very rich and the poor, Professor Sachs reminds us that beyond data, moral and civic virtues and decisions also lie at the heart of macroeconomics. He does not offer a magic bullet from academia. He once said, there are just basic problems requiring basic work. Nothing magic about it. But there was something magic about his academic progress. After growing up in Detroit in the USA, in a family that had roots in Eastern Europe, he chose to summer economics at Harvard College. Within 7 years of receiving his BA, summa cum laude, he'd completed his MA and PhD at Harvard University, joined its faculty, and been promoted to full professor at the exceptionally young age of 28. He doesn't look much older now to me. Not long after, he began deploying his expertise to help countries emerge from acute crises. As such, he found himself at the center of some pivotal moments in recent world history. This began in the 1980s in Bolivia, where he used what became known as his shock therapy in ending its hyperinflation and negotiating a drastic reduction in its external debts. Successes, measured in economic recoveries, prompted Poland's post-communist leaders to ask him to draft an economic blueprint for its transition from planned to market economy. Estonia and Slovenia followed. He was called on by Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev and then Russian President Boris Yeltsin. He has by now advised many dozens of world leaders in the Americas, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, the latter including China, where he worked with senior officials on its Western development strategy, and led campaigns to cancel the crippling debts of some of the poorest countries. In 2002, he moved from Harvard to Columbia University to lead its multidisciplinary Earth Institute, tasked with addressing the complex issues facing the world, which he directed until 2016. He continues to direct the university's Center for Sustainable Development, helping governments and others translate the UN's SDGs into policies and practices. The depth and breadth of his contributions have been recognized in awards too numerous to list here, but they include, as examples, the 2015 Blue Planet Prize, the leading global prize for environmental leadership, and the 2022 Tang Prize for Sustainable Development. He's twice been named among Time magazine's 100 most influential world leaders. As a macroeconomist, he understands that he has to look at the big canvas, in which history, culture, domestic politics, technology, geography, geopolitics, public opinion, and environmental and natural resource constraints all influence the economic destiny of a nation and its people, crossing disciplines in a way that is rare in his field. He's likened his work to that of a clinical doctor who must identify the disease and design a treatment. A practical approach, he has said, inspired not by economic theory, but by the work of his wife, Sonia, a medical doctor. His academic career has thus been one of action, research, and activism, grasping opportunities to solve problems on a global scale and to convince and prepare many others through education or advice to do so too. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I present Jeffrey David Sachs for admission to the degree of Doctor of Social Science, Honoris Causa.
Thank you, Professor Tuan and Professor Rollins. Please be seated. Professor Jeffrey Sachs will now deliver an acceptance speech.
Vice Chancellor Rocky Tuan, Professor Nick Rawlings, Provost and faculty, and many friends here and colleagues from many, many years of interaction and meetings. Let me express, first of all, my profound gratitude and feeling of great honor and thrill to be part of this wondrous institution and to be part of this family. And I also speak for my wife, Sonia, in thanking you for the great honor and the remarkable hospitality. Let me also tell you a little secret, which is, or not a secret, but just an added nice moment. I just signed the book as receiving an honorary degree, and whose name was just above that? Catalin Carico. Whoa, how nice. And congratulations to you. And we were just with her in Taipei in August at the celebration of the Tang Prize, and so wonderful to be with her there, so wondrous to celebrate her Nobel Prize yesterday, and also to feel part of this family together today. So thank you very much for that added special feature. So nice to see. Nick Rawlings, those were lovely words, and very moving for me, because you really captured the spirit of what I'm hoping to do and what I'm trying to do, and I'm most grateful to you for that. And I want to explain maybe just one part of that and where the idea comes from. You mentioned that I have said that it's not magic, it's somewhat straightforward to actually achieve the world you described, a world at peace, a world in which poverty has ended, a world in which the environmental dangers that we face so profoundly now, the climate change, the loss of biodiversity, the massive pollution, are all in our past, because we are living peacefully, harmoniously, without poverty, with shared prosperity, and with environmental sustainability. this actually is not a crazy idealistic dream. It is so close to our reach if we understand the components of it that it's actually hard to see how we would not grasp this opportunity together. And in thinking about that, I was very much moved in my career, actually from the first days, by another economist, John Maynard Keynes, who was, in my view, the greatest political economist of the 20th century. And of course, he was the leading British economist who not only was a great macroeconomist, he invented macroeconomics, which was no small feat. But he wrote one book and one essay that for me was fully transformative, and I want to cite it to explain my point of view. One is an essay that he wrote in 1930. It was the depths of the Depression. One could imagine hopelessness, that any chance of economic normalcy was gone forever, that the economy was busted beyond redemption. And he wrote in the depths of the Depression an essay called The Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren. And everybody should Google it, and it's 8 pages. Completely transformative of my life, I have to say, in my outlook. What did he say in those 8 pages? He explained the compound rate of interest, but in a particular way. He said that because of technological change, living standards have been rising at a compound rate of growth of around 1.5% to 2% per year. And he explained what that would mean by the time of his grandchildren, around 1980. And he explained, though he was writing in the depths of the Depression, that poverty would be eliminated in England by the time of his grandchildren. And he proved to be completely right, notwithstanding another decade of depression, and notwithstanding the Second World War, and notwithstanding the loss of empire. By the 1980s, extreme poverty was a thing of the past in Western Europe and in the United States. Yes, there was relative poverty, there was deprivation, there was inequality, but hunger, famine, lack of access to basic health care, except in extreme circumstances, had been eliminated. And it wasn't magic. It was the logic of continued economic, but especially technological and scientific progress. And Keynes noted wondrously in these short pages, which again I give you as a homework assignment, easy to find online, that for maybe 1,750 years between the time of the Roman Empire in the West or the Han Empire in the East and around 1750, there wasn't that much technological progress. And he noted in writing that a peasant from the Roman Empire would feel somewhat familiar in the circumstances of 18th century Britain. But then he noted that there was an acceleration. The acceleration, in my interpretation, really took place with James Watt's steam engine, to which we can give thanks to another great university, University of Glasgow, because they gave a workshop to James Watt in the 1770s so he could tinker and realize that adding a condenser to John Newcomen's steam engine would change the world. And of course, then came Faraday, and then came Daimler and Benz, and then came the Wright brothers, and then came Alan Turing sitting in his room with his imagination on John von Neumann. and the revolution that we know today as the digital revolution, born out of the minds of those two great geniuses, and then followed by semiconductors and integrated circuitry and modern computers designed on John von Neumann's basis. But Keynes's point was we could reliably look forward to the end of poverty. But he meant it for his society at the time. He meant it for Britain. A second book that he wrote was fundamental for my thinking. It blew me away when I read it, and it continues to absolutely mesmerize me with the mix of technical insight combined with moral insight. And that was Economic Consequences of the Peace in 1919, and I'll explain how this relates. Keynes was a member of the British delegation to the Versailles peace negotiations at the end of World War I, and he resigned in protest because his government of Lloyd George and the French government of Clemenceau imposed extraordinarily harsh conditions on Germany, blaming Germany uniquely for World War I, posing all the war guilt, and imposing heavy reparations. And Keynes described in that book why this was the wrong course. He said that this practically would backfire. To treat a nation in such a punitive way, to expect it to squeeze itself for a generation or more to repay victors in a war, was to provoke a massive counter-reaction. And he warned in 1919 that if we don't relieve this burden, we will face the consequences a generation from now. And of course, he was utterly prescient in that. And it taught me something very special from the early days, because everything I advised from then on related to that. His basic lesson was be nice. Don't be punitive. Don't cancel other countries. Don't say, as today, Russia, gone from the map. This one's evil. This one we don't deal with. This one we punish. Because economics is also ethics. And at the core of ethics is that there are normal people in every place in the world, and the capacity to find a path to cooperation. And economic crises lead to the potential of political disasters. When there is pain and when there is suffering, there is instability. When there is instability, there is demagoguery, there is fear, there is a resort to violence. There is every possibility of mayhem. It taught me something very basic. If a country like Bolivia was crushed by debt, it's an impoverished place. 10,000 feet up in the Himalayas, in the Andes, excuse me. Give it a break. Don't break this country. Don't destroy the hopes of these people. Relieve their debts. And it's a general lesson about cooperation, which is that we have the means, economically and financially, to cooperate and to help solve each other's problems, not to aggravate them, not to create them out of some hegemonic desire, out of some power lust, but to solve the problems. If you put these two writings together, they absolutely dispelled one of the worst ideas ever engendered in economics, which was an idea started by a very nice person, Thomas Robert Malthus, in 1798 in the Principles of Population, but then carried forward by people who were much darker in outlook. Malthus said, "We'll never escape poverty. Life is a struggle because there will always be more people than the earth can support." And Darwin actually used that idea to develop the theory of natural selection. But the social scientists, like Herbert Spencer, took it to mean that life was inherently a struggle, and that not only a struggle, but a struggle between nations, a struggle for survival. And of course, in later generations, the fascists, and especially the Nazis, took this as a race struggle and a struggle for survival across nations or civilizations, and that only the strongest would survive and the weakest would perish. We know this is completely wrong economically. We know this is a nonsense, a pernicious nonsense in terms of the realities of economics. If we look today, our world is $110 trillion annual output for 8 billion people. So even on the straight market calculations, we are roughly $13,000 per person on this planet. That means no poverty necessary for anybody. That means no hunger necessary for anybody. That means no extreme deprivation, no lack of access to water, sanitation, primary health care, schooling, digital connectivity for anybody on the planet, not even close. If you measure this output at what we call international prices rather than at market prices, technically making clear that in poorer countries price levels are lower so you get more per dollar, then the world output is closer to about $160 trillion, roughly $20,000 per capita. The idea that on such a planet, poverty is somehow necessary or unavoidable or a side effect of a struggle for survival or a threat to us in the rich countries in any way to see that poverty alleviated as somehow taking from us something that would be fundamentally even noticed by us is completely wrong. What Keynes said is the point. The world is rich because of the know-how. The world is rich because of the knowledge and the technology. And yes, the capacity to turn some silicon into a computer or a microprocessor or the Mate Pro 60 Huawei phone or some other miracle device. That's why we're rich. Not because there are poor people, but because we have the know-how to solve these problems. And the same applies to the environmental challenges as well. We could sit in a half an hour and sketch out an absolutely realistic world plan for decarbonizing the energy system by mid-century. How do I know? Well, one reason is it's been done in about 500 peer-reviewed academic papers. But another reason is that it's not magic. It's not that complicated. What does it depend on? Zero carbon electricity, renewable energy, or nuclear power, or geothermal power. It depends on electric vehicles. We're just coming from Beijing, where we were told that there are now 400 companies producing electric vehicles in China. Not bad, because that means that China alone could supply the world with the electric vehicles, and probably will, by the way. You could say the same with the photovoltaics that we need, or the hydrolyzers that are going to turn the sunshine directly into hydrogen, which can then be used for metallurgy or for other industrial processes that are not so easy to electrify. So once again, the basic insight, our well-being depends on our knowledge. And our knowledge, even today with what's in reach, is sufficient for that world that Professor Rawlings sketched out, is completely correct. And it's like Keynes said, that's the economic possibilities, not only for our grandchildren, not only for them and for our children, but for our time also. We don't have to wait. Now, I wrote in 2005 in The End of Poverty that we could reach the end of poverty by 2025. But it was a conditional statement, so I'm not going to retract it. We didn't come close, but it called on the rich countries trying to do that. My country didn't try. It lost its way. My government went to war, and then war, and then war, and then war. And it forgot about this global challenge. And it decided that it was much more interesting to ask who's number one between my country and China rather than how do we work together to actually achieve the solutions that everybody needs. So we didn't make it by 2025. But China, by the way, proved the concept. In 1980, the mainland was a sea of impoverished villages, very poor. By official data, even 70% in extreme poverty. By 2020, it's really true. No more extreme poverty in China. That's not just a slogan. I know it, by the way, because I was invited by the Chinese government in Beijing to visit in around 2017 the poorest part of China, Ningxia Autonomous Region. And we went to one of the poorest areas they wanted me to see to give any advice. And the first place we walked into, what was the woman's complaint? That her television antenna wasn't reliable enough. I thought, oh my God, we just came from African villages. There were no televisions anywhere. But there were televisions in every, yes, they were black and white, but there were televisions in every one of the houses of the settlement. So in 40 years, China ended poverty. Now we are in 2023, and Africa has put 2063 as its place on the horizon because 2063 is the date for the African Union's 100th anniversary. It was the founding of the Organization for African Unity. So I'm honored to be advisor to a study that will be given to the African leaders next February to show 40 years between 2023 and 2063 how realistic it is for Africa by then to be an upper middle income or a high income region. It's not a dream. It's very practical. Put the kids in school, ensure digital access, ensure electricity across the continent. Nothing magic, all quite straightforward. Now let me end with 2 points, if I might. First, the role of universities and great universities like Chinese University of Hong Kong. First, a thank you to be the co-chairs of the Hong Kong Sustainable Development Solutions Network. This is profoundly meaningful, and how grateful I know all of this 2,000 member organization is around the world. Millions of students in 145 countries around the world, that you are holding this position here such a critical and key part of the world. The knowledge in this room, the knowledge that you are imparting to the students, the knowledge of our students who know the digital world like we don't and are teaching us, is absolutely transformative and is absolutely essential to finding those practical answers to the power grid, or to precision agriculture, or to effective telemedicine, or to online education, or to all the other solutions that we know. And so I want to thank you profoundly and urge you with this excellence with purpose. This commitment is phenomenal, so important, and I think such a fantastic contribution to the world. And you're in the context of a magical place, Hong Kong, a unique place in the world, one of the true meeting places of the whole world, one of the great entrepôts of history. It dawned on me 42 years ago in my first visit to Hong Kong that if you don't love Hong Kong, you shouldn't be an economist, because this is economics in front of your eyes every moment. Well, I love Hong Kong, and I love economics, and I love what you do together with that. And I want to say that the role of Hong Kong in this global venture will be more important than ever. Have no doubt about it. Hong Kong is completely essential for mainland China's success in every bridge, in every connection with the world, in every initiative, in every transformation, and for all of the international aspirations of China for the Belt and Road Initiative, or the initiative that we were at this past week called GuideCo, the Global Energy Interconnection Development Cooperation Organization, which is the China State Grid, to help design that energy system for a zero carbon world. Hong Kong is absolutely key and essential. And what I am doing almost every day now, and almost every hour of every day, is trying to mobilize the financing that is needed to carry out the investments at scale for the transformations that we need to make sure that all children are in school. That's a financial issue first and foremost, not a technical issue. To make sure that there's universal health coverage, SDG 3. To make sure that everybody has access to clean, green energy services, SDG 7. To make sure that everybody has access to digital platforms, SDG 9, to make sure that we are decarbonizing the world economy, SDG 13, to make sure that we are protecting the marine and the terrestrial ecosystems, SDGs 14 and 15. All of this requires finance. Well, if you need finance, where do you go? Here. Because you have the expertise, the design, the institutions, the history, the trust to play an absolutely essential guiding role in the global transformation ahead. So I could not be more thrilled to be even more closely associated with you at Chinese University of Hong Kong and with this remarkable place on the planet. Thank you so much.
The honorary degree conferment ceremony has now concluded. Please rise.